Welcome to Tapped In. My name is David Figueroa-Martinez of DFM Coaching, and today we're going to be discussing how Jiu-Jitsu is a decision-making game, not about hoarding techniques. Early on, we have this tendency to collect techniques almost like we're collecting Pokemon. We want to have an answer for everything, and we think that the more techniques we have, the more answers we're going to have. The honest truth behind it is, by the time you get to black belt, you know a lot of shit. You know a lot of different techniques, but you are usually using maybe 10 solid A-game techniques, and everything else is kind of thrown to the side. Now, if I'm messing around, I'll pull one of those cards out the deck. I'll pull up this technique that I worked on 6 months ago, 3 years ago, this technique that I saw on YouTube just to mess around. But when I'm going A for A, I don't have a huge deck of techniques to pull from. I have a concentrated 5 to 10, and 10 might be stretching it in most cases. Our talent when we get to black belt is the decision-making tree that we have set up within our heads and within our muscle memory that really gets us the success that we want. We are not saying, I have to play this card when he does this. I have to play this card when he does that. By that level, we are moving based on memory. We're moving based on something we see, something we felt, an angle, the way he put his hand on the mat, the way he put his arm a little too far to the right and tackle this position a little bit better. That's really what we're going after. So do not, and I repeat this, and I know it's not going to help, do not build up an arsenal of techniques just because you think each one has to be played at a certain level or a certain time or a certain position. Your decision-making is really going to separate you from everyone else, and it's going to separate each belt from one another. White belts hesitate. They don't know enough. Granted, they're going to have to build up a deck because that deck is pretty weak, specifically of things that they do really well. As they progress through white belt, they're going to have a couple of techniques that they feel like, okay, these are the things that kind of work a little bit better in my favor. They don't always work. More often than not, they don't work. But I get a little further in the decision-making or in the battle with these techniques than I do anything else. So then that becomes their junior identity at that stage. Blue belts overthink. And part of the overthinking is that blue belts traditionally hoard a lot of techniques. They will go through, like I've compared this before, like a teenager who's picking up hobbies. One week they like this, next week they want inverted, the next week they want wrist locks, and the week after that they want arm bars. And this constant swaying, kind of like a college student who can't make up their mind on their major, is constantly causing them to make these decisions that are kind of rash. They switch from one area of study to the next. They move from that to the other one, and they never really get very deep in that decision making. They're constantly surface level. There might be 1 to 2 movements in or 2 options in, and then they give up and they throw something out once it gets difficult. Purple belt is where you start streamlining things. You start assigning, okay, I'm going to go down this route tree. I'm going to go down this specific technique, decision-making tree. When they do this, I do that. If they respond with this, I'm going to hit them with that. And it's one movement based on the other, focused specifically on what their opponent is doing or not doing. So this is where you start to really understand some of the decision-making that you're going to go through. So, for example, if I'm in closed guard and I hip bump, oftentimes, because a student can't hip bump and get them onto their back, they may have done it once or twice. They gained a little bit of success in it, and then they come across a position or a person where it's not happening anymore. So then they give up hip bump. It's a waste. But by purple, you're understanding, I'm going to do this hip bump. I'm going to do it in such a way that it's going to really threaten going over into mount. If they post, I'm going Kimura. If they post and their elbow gets really tight and I can't get to Kimura, I'm going guillotine. Sometimes they'll post and I can hip escape and then we start going triangle. Sometimes they'll post and we go omoplata. So this is where like purple belt is really where I think people start deciding, okay, I'm going to build a little system within it, the most common areas that I find myself in. So you start feeling a little bit more streamlined. You start throwing out techniques that do not serve you well. Not that you completely forget them. You just don't apply them to your A game. And this streamlining is where the real decision-making happens because you're understanding jiu-jitsu in a bigger scope. You're understanding that it's less about the techniques that you're going to use and more about the timing and the place in which you put them in. I have systems for every major position that I'm in. And that's really why at black belt, it feels like we know what you're doing. We're almost foreseeing the future. It feels that way. The situations that you come across at brown and black belt, you've been doing it your whole jiu-jitsu career. So it's not foreign, usually. There are a couple of times where people surprise me, but it's not foreign. You've been in bottom half. You've been in top mount. You've been in north-south. You've been in all these positions, and you've stockpiled data and reference points and tests that you were running when you were blue, purple, that now you formulated, okay, this is my mini system when I get to this position. This is my mini system when I get to that position. And because I've spent time in these spots, I'm allowing myself to, one, fail a lot and then get a lot of data based on that failure. And then I can start formulating those systems. When I'm in that position, I feel good most spots. Even when I'm being crushed, I'm like, okay, I know that he's going to eventually do this and I'm going to take advantage of it. And again, people surprise you. Sometimes you're bottom aside and a white belt is crushing the life out of you. And you're like, I should not have been here, but I have answers. It's going to take me a minute. So the decision making, what it means in jiu-jitsu is you're recognizing patterns faster. You're recognizing that someone who attacks your open guard will typically go to the right over your left. There are very few people that I spar with that initially pass on the left. So they'll start passing on the right. Most people will try to maybe knee cut or come through the knees. A few people will double under, and a few people will bullfighter pass and like go around. But most people will go through. That's an identifying pattern that I've noticed over the years. So because I know most people will go through, I've developed a game. So with a knee cut, I'm framing. I'm going into reverse de la Hiva. When they go into reverse de la Hiva, I have options for sweeps from there. I have options to hold you, to fend you off. But I have to make certain things happen in order for that to work. When you respond a certain way, let's say we're in reverse de la Hiva and you just keep coming forward, and I'm framing, I'm going to start pushing back. Push, just a nudge. I'm not pushing you all the way back because that's going to be almost physically impossible for most scenarios. But I'm going to push you back just enough for you to respond back to me. And when you respond back to me, I push you back one more time. And then we do sickle sweep. I can start to push your knee back and maybe do a John Wayne. So there's a system that I'm playing there. I recognize the pattern. I also simplify the amount of decisions that I have to make by narrowing the field down to the thing that I really like doing. And in that scenario, it's reverse de la Hiva. So when I go reverse de la Hiva, I'm not worried about spider. I'm not worried about regular de la Hiva. I'm not worried about butterfly. I'm not worried about anything else at that moment. When you knee cut, reverse de la Hiva, that is my answer. So I've narrowed the choices down. I'm choosing the most high percentage for me and my body type and my skill level. And for me, it's reverse de la Hiva, sickle sweep, and sometimes I drop my butterfly hooks in and I square back up, depending on what they're doing or how tight they are. But again, I've narrowed everything down. I'm choosing the most valuable techniques that I have. And most of the techniques that I have are universal for a bunch of, not universal completely, but they are applicable to more than one situation. And I'm funneling the things back to the territory that I'm most familiar with. Butterfly, reverse de la Hiva, half guard. Those are positions that I love playing. I'm not picking a random guard and seeing what happens when it's A versus A. I might do that with someone who's newer when I'm trying to develop something. But at this stage, A versus A, I'm going to the most high percentage positions that I have. I also have to accept when a decision is inferior or was wrong and then adapt to it. I cannot sit and bash myself for making a bad decision. We all did it at one point. I used to get swept, and internally I would be like, fuck, that was dumb. And I would tell my internal voice would be criticizing myself for making this blunder of an error. The version of me now sometimes laughs at the error because I'm like, ugh, I don't know how I got rolled. I know this position. I should have done this better. I have a student that has this weird, like he wraps over the back and he bridges and twists. I don't even know how to explain it, but it's his go-to. And for a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months, he was getting on me regularly and I couldn't quite understand it. And then there were points where I would just laugh. Like I would try something. I knew I didn't, in my head, I'm like, he's not sweeping me here. I'm solid. And then he would make a micro adjustment and I'd be rolling again. And I would just laugh. I didn't bash myself. When we spend too much time bashing ourselves, two things happen. We're not getting back into the action and we're allowing him or her to start moving on to their next point of reference. So I have to, as I'm being swept, counter that sweep. And if I can prevent it, even if it's halfway or almost 100% in, and I somehow swivel my hips or I self-correct some way, it puts me in a better position. If all things fail, instead of bashing myself, I have to at least get into a defensive position so that once I get rolled onto my back, I can now start escaping. Don't bash yourself. This is a game of trial and error, and we're going to fuck up left and right. And your job is just to stay in the moment and understand that you're going to make mistakes. And your first and most important job after that mistake is adjusting instantly. Staying calm. We have to stay calm in everything that we're doing. If we panic, our decision-making falters. Our decision-making gets slowed down because we are now driven by emotion and worry. And in that state, we do not think clearly. We might extend our arms and push when we should have framed. And yes, a straight arm is a form of frame, but it's not the best thing. Sometimes we want to push and we extend our arms, but our arms aren't locked and they're kind of in that 70% range. And because now I'm using musculature, I'm starting to get drained. I'm carrying their weight. I get tired. They drop their weight further, and then I'm in a bad position and I'm tired. Opposed to, let me stay in the moment. Let me calm myself. I'm going to frame with the structure of my arms, and I could withstand that longer. Ways to level up your decision making. Limit the game in each round to force specific and clear decisions. Anytime I'm developing a system for myself, no matter the position, I will routinely recircle back to that. And I know it's easier said for brown and black belt that's more competent at this sport, but you should make it a goal to, if the system you're trying to create is in half guard bottom, that you continually go back to bottom half guard. And it's in certain rounds. There's going to be certain rounds where you're just going to be going your A game the whole time. When you're building up that skill, inoculate yourself to the stressors of the position so that they become almost second nature to you. And if you fail, so what? If you fail, come back to it. And then start formulating the structure and the ingredients that you need for success in that spot. You can do drills of specific scenarios. And sometimes we will have games in that eco style where we're going to start in bottom half bottom person, your job is to get an underhook. And that might be part of your system. And then top person, your job is to prevent the underhook for as long as possible. And then in the next iteration, the bottom person, your job is to get the underhook. Top person, your job is to pass. So then you're inoculating yourself to, one, the stressors of the position. You don't have to worry and think about anything else. You don't have to worry about them in mount and north-south and all these other positions, because you focus the game and the parameters and the win scenario to this specific element, that you don't have to force anything back. The game itself does it for you. So these mini drills are really important too. Ask yourself one question after every roll. Did I commit or did I hesitate? If you commit to a bad decision, there's a high likelihood that you might finish that successfully. I've had people who come in, wrestlers and people in like SF or higher military settings, not just like your basic soldier or sailor, but people who have to make big time decisions. When they commit, even if it's a bad decision, it puts them in a more dominant position or scenario. So I've had a couple of guys that come through, one wrestler, one military, and even as white belts, they would come in and they would commit 100% to the decision that they made. There was no half stepping. There was no, maybe this won't work. This has to work. This is the decision I made. There is no turning back. And that drive and that commitment creates a lot of problems for people. And there were times when they would commit to this thing and I'd be like, well, that was not intelligent necessarily, like jiu-jitsu wise, but because they committed everything they had to it like it was their last stand, it altered where I was going next. Because maybe now they reached a like 50-50 position. And in that 50-50 position, I don't have control. They don't have control. And now we're scrambling for the best position. But you'll have people who commit to or half commit to a solid decision. And because they didn't throw themselves into it, there's like a pause, there's a delay, and we can then take advantage of that delay. So sometimes the right answer is just the one that you commit to completely. And it's weird how it works that way. We'll have students who come in and they make the right decisions, but everything's kind of hesitant. They're not really sure about themselves. And right decision, not the full commitment, usually ends out badly. Wrong decision, fully committed, sometimes ends out really good, or at least in a position that's slightly better than the one you were in. Develop a simple flow for each position. I have depth in a lot of systems or a lot of different positions, but sometimes your flow or your system is going to just be bridge frame. No matter what position I'm in, bridge, a bottom position, bridge frame. And then we can build off of that. And if you can at least work into that bridge frame, the weight's not completely on you. You can now explore some other territory, some other options. But it's really important to at least build that 1, 2, and then you can start adding that third option. And then when you get comfortable with that, you start adding in a fourth option. Prioritize your decisions over the end result. Just commit. Say, this is what I have to do. This is the decision that I'm going to make. And however it turns out, it turns out. But I'm going to commit to that decision as quickly as possible. I'm hoping that this helps. If you have any questions about systems or flows, or maybe you're constantly just second guessing yourself, please let me know. I would love to help. DFM.2099 on Instagram and Threads. I'm usually available for questions. I also have a free community on School, DFM Coaching BJJ. The link is in the show notes. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I love helping. Until next time, thank you so much.